So I'm back on YouTube after doing this ridiculous video months ago that no one watched, that I spent months making, but sometimes you just got to throw some chaff out instead. So this is some chaff. The purpose of this chaff is that I'm writing essays once a week at the moment. I'm kind of pushing it to once a week on Buttondown because I left Substack because Nazis, and I've been writing these essays. And the essays can be about lots of different things. They can be about wrestling, they can be about poetry, they can be about video games. But I'm just trying to churn one of these things out every week. And what I found out with churning out essays is that sometimes I start writing them and they end up being many thousands of words long. Just a week's worth of writing. Even though I've been doing other stuff during the week, I've managed to churn out 4,000 words, like one a few months ago on Orange Cassidy, and about how the wrestler Orange Cassidy rescues romanticism from the jaws of irony. But I won't be talking about that today. I'll be talking about the last one I wrote, because this is my idea. It's kind of a hard sell getting people to click on a link and read a 3,000 word essay, which is what the last one was. So I thought I'd set a little challenge to myself to get this YouTube up and running again. Because I'm not recording a podcast at the moment, which used to go with my essays before, but I have reasons for doing that, but mainly it's to do with leaving Substack and not having free podcast capabilities anymore. So while I look for someone else to host a podcast, I think I'm going to do something slightly different, which is make videos. But rather than me just reading out the whole post verbatim on video, which will be tedious, I'm going to see if I can just sum up what I said in the essay in 10 minutes of rambling to a camera. So that's what I'm going to do this week, and maybe if I have time, if I can find a non-time consuming way of doing this, I can do it next week too. So this week's essay, and I'm just going to refer to the essay once, and then I'm just going to speak as if I'm just talking rather than going back to sort of, and then I wrote in the essay. I'm just going to talk through the idea instead. So I started off talking about earplugs, and I am going to talk about in a few minutes, I'm going to move this on to the Romantics, their idea of the imagination, and VR, and specifically I guess the Apple Vision Pro, because that's been in the news. But I've been thinking about other appendages that I've tried to enhance my experiences with, things I've tried to enhance my life with, and one thing that did enhance my life in many ways is basically, I don't know if this is going to come into focus because I'm not looking at the screen, silicone earplugs. Now you might notice these aren't, this isn't a sales pitch, by the way, okay? This is just something I've been using for years but stopped using recently, and I'm going to talk about why. Now, as you can see, look at them. They look like little Mentos. They're like lovely little breath mint things. So me and Mrs. O'Sullivan both use them, and the reason why is because we live in a South London flat. It's very small and cluttered, and there's 4 of us that live in this flat, and it gets noisy at night. God love my neighbours, right? On all sides. We used to have a bunch of gentrifiers living over there who would sing really loudly when they got in at 2 o'clock in the morning and didn't understand why I would bumble out of bed and ring their doorbell. We've got lovely upstairs neighbours, we've got lovely downstairs neighbours. Now sometimes the neighbours, all kinds of noises happen, basically. You know what it's like when you've got upstairs, downstairs neighbours and all that kind of thing. Sometimes people play really bassy music. Sometimes people are just sort of rolling the coasters of their office chair along a bare wood floor just above your head. And sometimes just something like that is enough to keep you awake. And so rather than have any further run-ins with our neighbours, we decided to sort of see what we could do on our end, and our end was to get these earplugs. Now, as I said, they're different to those. Normally you get those orange earplugs that you jam into your ears on a building site. I know all of you watching right now, I know you've all done work like that, building site, factory floors, all that hard labour. I know you're a rowdy blue collar bunch. So anyway, those orange ones, which I used to use when I was a gardener and I was using machinery like a hedge cutter or a strimmer or something like that, and I would shove it in my ears, but they were rough. You could really feel them just blocking up your ears, and you couldn't sleep with these things just stuck in your ears. It's very uncomfortable. But these silicone ones, now you're not meant to shove them like right down your lug hole. Although I have done that before, and then I kind of plucked them out in the morning, and I've seen the shape of my ear canal, which is kind of gross but really interesting at the same time. But the point is, you use them to kind of seal your ears off instead, and they really work. Once you've got kind of just block the cave entrance rather than shoving it all the way down the cave, they really work in blocking the world out. And so yeah, we got a few really good nights sleep. But as I went out to stay at other places, I'd often forget to take the trusty silicone earplugs with me. And so what would happen is I would find myself suddenly lying down, just awash in this sea of noise with my eyes closed. And I think another reason why is because of the kids as well. Sometimes the kids would be sleeping down the hall, and I just wanted to keep an ear out for them. And weirdly, I kind of realised I can sleep in these conditions. So, you know, sometimes sleep in East London, main road outside, people coming and going back from the night out on the Raz, stereo, you know, speakers booming, some idiot destroying their hearing at 3 a.m, all kinds of stuff. And yet, even if it would wake me up sometimes, rather than needing to block it out, I would just almost do the opposite. I would let myself go and almost find myself bobbing like Iggle Piggle on his little boat, always being cast out to sea at the end of In the Night Garden for some reason. That's just something that parents with toddlers are going to find hilarious. But I'd be bobbing in that ocean of sound and I'd be fine. And if anything, I kind of realised that when you block your ears up, it's not really silence. It's just a kind of lack of sound. What is silence? Silence is, yes, your environment is quieter, but you're kind of quieter too. And also your body, there's not a mismatch between what your body is perceiving and what the ear is detecting. I think that's another important point. So sometimes things are rumbling around, but you can feel those rumbles, those little tremors, or the whole building shaking when a night bus goes by. You can kind of feel it in your body. And I think there's a bit of a mismatch if you're lying there and there's all this noise, but you've blocked out the noise, but the rest of your body still knows about the noise. So another thing about this, so yeah, I learned, I guess, that stillness isn't just something which is your ears blocked, it's something that the body feels. And also stillness, if you're in a completely quiet environment but your head is full of screaming thoughts, then nothing is still, right? So you kind of bring your own stillness to it too. So moving on from that, I thought about other ways in which I've tried to compensate for aspects of my life, and I am terrible at buying tech. Right now I'm speaking into a Sony ZV-1 camera and other things that I hardly ever use, so I'm glad I'm bringing it out of the drawer to use right now. But I will find myself researching tech, creating a scenario in my head, telling myself, oh, I really, really need that. I really need to buy that. And what I do is I just, I research for about 2 months. And then finally I've decided, okay, I'm going to buy it. And I decide whether I'm going to hide it from my wife or whatever, or try to kind of introduce a new object into the periphery of her vision for a few days and then kind of push it more central, so that when she says, is that new? I say, no, we've had that for a while. Because she's unconsciously accepted it already, because I've been leaving it in the periphery. This is gold advice I'm giving to all spouses here, by the way. So I always find reasons, like my lack of productivity. Oh, I'm not writing a lot. Oh, I need a better keyboard. That's what I need. It's something's blocking the transmission of my genius thoughts to my fingertips and to the computer. That's something's in the way, and that can only be alleviated by spending money on e-waste. So I have been absolutely prone to the recent release of the Apple Vision Pro. All that VR stuff. I straight away took one look at Apple Vision Pro, went, oh God, let's see how much this is going to cost. $3,500. I'm not going to get that. That's. I live in a small cluttered flat, but that's a deposit for a slightly bigger cluttered flat. That's probably what I'd spend that kind of money on. But I did start looking at the alternatives. So some of them are those glasses that you can put on and you have the little screens. The glasses kind of sit in front of your face like that though, which is really weird. And stuff like the Meta Quest as well. And I was thinking, oh, maybe I can still have this environment where I have screens here, and here. And it's all just like Minority Report, because when we watch Minority Report, we all think that's a future I want to live in. So, yeah, I'll have all these screens here and I can be productive, and nothing's going to stop these genius thoughts from flooding out of my mind and taking the world by storm, finally. And I was thinking about that, and I was also, the other thing that seduces me is I love films, and you know how cinemas are great, but they're full of people, and how people like have they bring their screens to the cinema, so you're there and you're sat there and there's someone in front of you, and the screen, when the screen lights up, it's a weird thing in a cinema when someone in front of you looks at their phone. It's not just like a little light for a second. Like sometimes the usher, back in the day when I was a kid, an usher would come through and they'd have a little torch and they'd show people around to the chairs, and that wasn't very invasive. But there's something about a phone going on about 3 rows in front of you that suddenly it just goes like that. And so the idea of having a cinema without idiots in it and just being able to watch something on a massive 100-foot virtual screen, it sounds amazing. But I did suddenly think about how, again, this idea of tech being sold as something that makes up for a discrepancy that you feel that is there in your life. And so the idea, I think what I ultimately thought was this would be no more a sense of space. And I've tried some VR stuff and it's not the top tier stuff. So I could be judging something. I could be judging the equivalent of those scratchy orange building site earbuds rather than the super smooth silicon earbuds. But according to the reviews and a lot of people, there's still that mismatch. There's still that sense of something really heavy on the front of your face, even with the Apple Vision Pro. There's still that sense of that slight icky, seasicky, headache-inducing quality and the fakeness of things, because ultimately it's 2 little screens right in front of your ears, and ultimately they're just doing the same thing as the earbuds. They're kind of blocking off your vision with little screens. They're not really creating this space. And that got me a thinking, because I teach English literature and creative writing, mainly poetry at university, and I'm going to be looking at the Romantics tomorrow, actually. And the Romantics obviously were distinct by their ideas of the imagination, the power of the imagination. And if I was just to come at you and say, you don't need a VR headset, you just want to use your imagination, you would obviously tell me to piss off, and I would deserve to get told to piss off. But I do think that there is a way in which the Romantics, particularly Coleridge, approached the idea of the imagination. And that's ultimately the idea I'm going to arrive at here as I sum up a few thousand words of an essay within 10 minutes of speaking. And so the Coleridge thing in particular, and some of the other Romantics, they had a few different notions of the imagination. And in a lot of old poems, the word fancy is brought up a lot. In the Milton poem about I thought I saw my late espoused saint. Last night I saw my late espoused saint. Is that the name of it? I wish I had the notes to say the exact name, but what can you do? And it's a beautiful poem about seeing his wife who had died, and he'd never seen her in life because he was blind, and so her face was veiled. And there's that term, he says, but to my fancied sight. And so fancied sight, that's not him saying, the fancy is not me going, it's not like someone in a bawdy 1960s comedy going, oh, fancy, and it's not kind of, oh, fancy that either, or I fancy you. Fancy is analogous with the imagination, the inner world, the inner vision. But Coleridge, in his essay on the imagination, whose name I've forgotten, I know this is like a video that's ultimately the aim is for people who can't be bothered to read an essay and being slightly patronising about that, and yet I couldn't be bothered to kind of double check this essay either, so let's just hope that my memory of it chimes with what's actually said in it. And that is that he has an idea of the fancy, 2 kinds of imagination. You could say there's a capital I imagination, which we'll get into in a second, and then there's something called the fancy, and which is a secondary form of imagination. That is a kind of form of imagination where thoughts just arrive to us. It's like our inner mental life, but it's that insubstantial inner mental life. When it becomes more focused and substantial, it becomes the imagination, and the imagination is the powerful thing that can change the world, to quote another Romantic, William Blake. What is now proved was once imagined. And so for him in particular, it was about writing poetry, but it could be creating any work of art. So in order to kind of get your imagination to sort of the powerful state that could rival something like a VR headset, in fact something that could beat the VR headset. There has to be some other activity that comes with it. Now, that activity can be something like writing a poem. It could be something like painting. It could be writing a novel. It could just be writing out your dreams, trying to remember your dreams, or a memoir where you're fishing out this half forgotten memory from childhood and making it whole and new again. And often, what will happen is, if we try to create a work of art to incorporate the imagination and to strengthen the imagination, what happens is that the work of art will probably fail. Why do we fail? Because the image in our head was so much stronger. Well, in a way, that's a win. Because that image would not have been summoned in such a vivid way. That image within your head wouldn't have become so real if you hadn't been able to summon it through trying to create a work of art. So the point I'm making is, if you got $3,500, I mean, like Coleridge didn't have an Apple Vision Pro, he just had a very serious opium habit instead, which probably was his equivalent. I don't know how much he blew on the old opium and how much it really helped him. It's meant to be that he wrote Kubla Khan while completely off his tits on it. So, but I guess my point is, if you got that money, hey, go ahead and buy yourself an Apple Vision Pro or a Meta Quest or whatever. But I think if you feel that you need to kind of escape the immediate environs of this world, and I think it's healthy to do that sometimes, then you can do that without any expensive optical equipment like what I'm recording this video with right now. You can do it by simply creating something, even if that is something that you never show to anyone else in the whole wide world. Even if it's something that you show to the whole wide world and they point and laugh and go, ha ha, you're a loser. Doesn't matter. You went to that place, and the best thing you can do is just go straight back to that place another way afterwards. And that was the point of the whole essay I was making. And I have no idea if this took 10 minutes because I can't see the viewfinder thing. I don't even think I'm going to do that flashy thing that the kids do, which is have a whole bunch of jump cuts. I'm just going to leave it like it is because I'm such a good shit talker. So that was all. Now, if you want to go into more detail about that, feel free to look at the little link in this video, and that will link to my button-down essays, which you can receive in your inbox as well as emails. And there's a little bit written about the Zen monk Ryokan as well, and how much of a kind of a superhero of patience and the imagination he was too. But I'm going to leave that there. Did you enjoy this video? Leave a little comment, all the usual gubbins, but I might do this again because I just had fun talking rubbish for 10 minutes, and I'll write rubbish about something else in the week to come, post it, and maybe I'll be back here talking absolute bollocks about it again. Have a good one. Bye.